At the bachelor party the night before the wedding, the truth or dare penalty was brutal. Show the most hidden photo on your phone. Gina, Peter's so-called girl bro, lost. She just grinned and cast her screen onto the big TV. A marriage license filled the screen, stamped by the county clerk. Names: Peter Cooke and Gina Draper. Date: yesterday. The room went dead silent. I stared at Peter's drained face. Gina didn't flinch. She patted his shoulder. Oops. Guess you found out. Joey, don't take it seriously. Just a dumb bet. I wanted to see what the county clerk's office looked like, so I dared Peter to register a marriage with me. She leaned in, eyes on me like I was the joke. You're still getting your wedding tomorrow. The vows, the ceremony. I just borrowed your fiancé for a stamp. Don't tell me you're jealous of his buddy. Peter jumped up and pulled me in. Babe, listen. You're the only one in my heart. It was just a joke. He pulled out the diamond ring, dropped to one knee. I'll file for divorce first thing tomorrow. It won't mess up our noon wedding. Invites are already out. Don't make this a scene in front of my friends. Once we're married, all my money's yours, okay? I smiled. He had no clue how any of this worked. Didn't even know divorce came with a 30-day wait. I didn't take the ring. I pulled out my phone and blasted a group text canceling the wedding. The send notification cut through the room. Peter shot up and snatched my phone. He stared at the group chat. Panic flashed, then twisted into anger. Joey Jensen, are you insane? I said I'd file for divorce tomorrow. You really had to take it this far? You trying to make me a joke in front of everyone? Gina picked at her ear and snorted. Peter, I told you girls are drama. Can't take a joke without blowing it up. She swung a leg over the couch and sat there, chewing gum. Joey, you're being way too uptight. Peter and I grew up like family. If I actually wanted him, you wouldn't even have had a shot. It's just paper. You really gonna kill the vibe over that? A few of his buddies jumped in, same tune. I was the problem. I looked at the guy I'd loved for 5 years cold. If it's just paper, then go marry it tomorrow. I turned to grab my bag. Peter grabbed my wrist. If you walk out that door tonight, don't expect me to come crawling after you. He clenched his jaw, yanked a bank card from his wallet, and slapped it on the table. Didn't you want that limited edition bag? Take it. Spend whatever. Call it compensation. But send another message. Say the cancellation was just truth or dare. The card made my stomach turn. 5 years ago his startup crashed. He couldn't even afford food. I worked 3 jobs to carry us. Back then, he carved me a wooden hair clip, eyes red, swearing I'd never suffer again. Now he had money, and thought it could buy me. I shook off his hand, didn't even look at the card. Keep your money. Stay with your girl, bro. I shoved the door open and walked out. Didn't look back. Behind me, glass shattered. Then Peter's voice, sharp with anger. Let her go. Let's see how long she keeps this up. The night air hit cold. I pulled my coat tighter, and the tears finally came. 6 straight months. That's how long I'd spent planning this wedding, every detail on me. But my fiancé had legally married someone else yesterday. I don't know how long I cried. Then my phone started buzzing like crazy in my bag. The screen lit up. The hospital. I answered. A nurse's voice came fast and tight. Is this Joey Jensen? Your grandmother just went into heart failure. She needs bypass surgery now. Please come sign the consent forms and make the payment right away. Grandma was my only family. My parents died young. She raised me collecting recyclables. I ran to the street like I'd lost it, hands shaking so bad I could barely open a car door. By the time I got to the hospital, they'd already rushed her into the ER. A doctor came up, face tight, holding a critical notice. She's in extremely critical condition. We need surgery now. With ICU after, it'll be about $300,000. Make the payment and we'll start immediately. $300,000. Everything I had, savings, years of wages, sat in a joint account under Peter's name. Back then, I called it trust. Said it was for our wedding. I gave it all to him. My fingers shook as I dialed Peter. It rang forever before someone picked up. Gina. Hello? Joey? Peter can't talk right now. We're at the police station. Her voice was casual, almost smug. I bit my lip, forced myself steady. Put Peter on. My grandma's in the ER. I need the money from our joint account. Gina laughed, soft and mocking. Wow, that's a stretch. You were fine canceling the wedding earlier. Now your grandma's in the ER? Peter's busy helping me deal with the fight. Don't bother him with nonsense. I cut her off. Gina Draper. This is life or death. I'm not joking. Put him on. Maybe it was something in my voice. A few seconds later, Peter came on impatient. Joey, what are you trying to pull now? Gina got into it with some guys at a street stall and cracked someone's head. I'm negotiating with the family. I leaned against the hospital wall, tears slipping down. My grandma went into heart failure. She needs $300,000 for surgery. Please transfer the money. Peter let out a cold laugh. So now you're cursing your own grandma just to make me come back and apologize? I saw her yesterday. She was fine. How would she suddenly have heart failure? I was so desperate I was basically begging. I'm not lying. The doctor's right here. If you don't believe me, talk to him. I shoved the phone at the doctor. He just opened his mouth. The line went dead. Peter hung up. I called back. His phone was already off. Despair hit like a tidal wave. I stared at the red light over the ER doors, my whole body going numb. 3 years ago, when Grandma got sick, Peter sold his motorcycle without a second thought to cover her bills. He'd said, "Joey, your family is my family. I'd give everything to save your grandma." That one line kept me with him for 5 years. Now he was cleaning up his girl bro's street fight, and hung up on the call that could have saved her. The doctor sighed and shoved the payment notice into my hand. "You need to hurry. She doesn't have time." I flipped through my contacts like I was scrambling blind, calling every classmate and coworker I could think of. After begging everywhere, I barely scraped together $50,000. Still nowhere near $300,000. I clenched my teeth, flagged a cab, and went straight to the police station where Gina was. I reached the mediation room and looked in through the glass. Gina sat there, legs crossed, hair messy, a bruise on her lip. Peter stood next to her, holding an ice pack to her cheek like it mattered. His eyes were full of concern. "You're too reckless. Why would you even get into a fight with those guys?" Gina shrugged. "They wouldn't shut up. Kept harassing me. You're a real one though, staying this late." Peter smiled, kinda helpless, and ruffled her short hair. "If I don't stay with you, who will? I already worked it out with them. We'll pay $200,000 and settle it off the record." The second he said money, I pushed the door open. They both looked over. Peter's face dropped. "Joey, you following me?" I walked straight up to him, eyes locked on the bank card in his hand. "You just said $200,000. You paying it with that?" He frowned like it was obvious. "So what if I am?" Gina acted in self-defense. "If she gets a record, how's she supposed to get a job? I'm lending it to her. Once we're married, I'll earn it back. What's the problem?" My whole body shook. My nails dug into my palms. "That's our savings. More than half is my grandma's pension. I told you on the phone, she's in the ER. She needs that money to live." Gina rolled her eyes. "You're still putting on a show? You followed us here just to stop Peter? It's just money. I'll pay you back after my bonus next month. You really gonna be this cheap?" I ignored her, eyes on Peter. "Transfer the rest. Now." He stood and shoved the card back into his wallet. "Joey Jensen, this is unbelievable. You that jealous you can't show basic decency?" Gina's shaken up. "Instead of caring, you're making a scene. Where's the grace of someone about to be my wife?" I stared at him. Familiar. And a total stranger. His girl bro hurt someone, and he drained our savings without blinking. My grandma was in the ER, waiting on that money to live, and he called me jealous. I sucked in a shaky breath and dropped to my knees. "Peter, I'm begging you. I won't ask for anything back. Just transfer the rest. That's her life." He flinched, then his face twisted with disgust. He yanked me up. "Are you done? You really going this far just to drag me back? Let me be clear. Even if you dropped right here, I still wouldn't give you a cent for that made-up story." He shoved my hand away. I lost my balance and hit the floor. His arm slid around Gina. They walked out. At the door, he paused, voice cold. "Stay here. Think about what you did. Call me when you learn how to act." I watched them disappear into the night. My phone started ringing in my pocket. My hands shook as I answered. "Miss Jensen, the patient didn't make it. Please come say your goodbyes." I don't know how I made it out of the police station. Dawn was breaking. The wind cut across my face like a blade, but it didn't touch the pain in my chest. By the time I got back to the hospital, they'd already moved Grandma to the morgue. A white sheet covered her small, fragile body, cutting off the last warmth I had. I didn't cry. I'd run out of tears sometime during that endless night. Numb, I handled the death certificate, called the funeral home, and watched them slide her into cold storage. 3 years ago, Grandma held Peter's hand and placed mine in his. "Peter, Joey's had it rough. From now on, you're her support." Back then, he cried harder than I did and swore he'd take care of me for life. I thought I'd found shelter. Turns out he was the storm. I pulled out the wooden hair clip he'd carved for me. The edges were worn smooth from years of holding it. It used to mean everything. I gripped it with both hands and snapped it in half. 5 years of loving him snapped with it. By the time I finished arranging Grandma's funeral, it was already noon. The exact time we were supposed to be saying our vows. I took a cab back to our apartment. The second I opened the door, wedding decorations hit me. Pastel balloons floating overhead, like a joke. I went to the bedroom, pulled out 2 suitcases and started packing. Only my stuff, clothes, documents. Anything he bought, even socks I left behind. I zipped the last suitcase. The door unlocked with a fingerprint scan. Peter walked in, holding a fancy cake box. He looked tired, but there was this easy confidence in his eyes. In his hand was that famous blueberry cake from downtown. My favorite. Every time I got upset, he'd bring it to smooth things over. He spotted the suitcases and frowned. Then it vanished. He set the cake on the coffee table, voice softening. Babe, still mad? He stepped in to hug me, like always. I moved. His hand hung there for a second before he pulled it back. All right, enough with the attitude. I dragged Gina to file for divorce first thing this morning. See, I kept my word. He pointed at the clock. It's noon. We missed the ceremony, but we can still make the banquet. Go change. The makeup artist's already at the hotel. It's our big day. Don't let everyone laugh at us. Like filing for divorce and bringing a cake fixed everything. Like I should just fall back into place. I looked at him calm. No anger. No tears. No running into his arms. I pulled a paper from my pocket and handed it over. Peter paused, a faint smile forming. What's this? A written apology? Or a prenup? He took it, glanced down. His smile froze. It was a death certificate. Grandma's name was printed clear. Time of death, 4:05 a.m. The exact moment he'd been at the station. Pushing me aside over Gina's $200,000. His hand started shaking. His voice broke. This. What is this supposed to mean? Joey, don't joke about this. I looked at him calm. You don't need to divorce her. The wedding's canceled for good. So are we. The silence in the apartment was heavy, suffocating. The pastel balloons bumped lazily against the ceiling, mocking the graveyard of our relationship below. Peter stared at the death certificate. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse himself. His eyes darted from the paper to my face, searching for the punchline. Searching for the angry, jealous Joey he thought he knew. He found nothing. Just a void. No, he whispered. His voice cracked, stripping away the arrogant CEO facade he'd worn for the past year. No. Joey, this is a fake. You had someone print this to scare me, right? Because I hung up? Because I paid Gina's settlement. He tried to force a laugh, but it came out as a wet, desperate wheeze. He dropped the cake box. The expensive blueberry cake hit the floor with a dull thud, the cardboard crushing inward. It's not fake, I said, my voice steady. It surprised even me how little emotion I had left. You can call the hospital. You can call the morgue. She died at 4:05 a.m. while you were handing over her life savings to keep your girl bro out of a holding cell. Peter's hands started to tremble violently. The paper shook in his grip. Joey, I didn't know. I swear to God. I thought you were just trying to get me to come back. You've never lied, but Gina said. I interrupted, stepping around him to grab the handles of my suitcases. And you listened. Because you always listened to her. You married her, Peter. You literally married her. For a joke. For a stamp. I'm divorcing her, he shouted, stepping into my path, his eyes red and frantic. We filed the papers this morning. It's over. It takes 30 days, Peter, I said flatly. In this state, there's a 30-day cooling-off period before a divorce is finalized. You didn't even know that, did you? He froze. His mouth opened but nothing came out. You are legally her husband. Which is fitting because she's the only one you protected. I pulled the suitcases past him. I've calculated the exact amount of my own money, and my grandmother's pension, that was in that joint account. You stole $200,000 of it. I expect it wired to my personal account by the end of the week. If not, I'll see you in court for theft and embezzlement. Joey, wait. He lunged forward, grabbing my shoulders. His fingers dug in desperate. Tears were finally spilling over his cheeks. Please. I'll pay it back. I'll give you everything. My company, my shares, all of it. Just don't leave. Grandma wouldn't want. I slapped him. It echoed in the empty room like a gunshot. The impact stung my palm, but it felt good. It felt like the first breath of air after drowning. Peter stumbled back, holding his cheek, looking at me with wide, shattered eyes. Do not, I said, my voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Ever say her name again. I turned, walked out the door, and didn't look back. The heavy door clicked shut, severing 5 years of my life in an instant. The funeral was 3 days later. It was raining. A cliché that felt entirely appropriate. I stood under a black umbrella, watching the casket lower into the earth. It was a small gathering. Just me, a few co-workers who had lent me money that night, and the hospital nurse who had held my hand in the morgue. I wore black. I felt nothing but a quiet, hollowed-out resolve. I had spent the last 72 hours operating like a machine. I rented a small, cheap studio apartment across town. I moved my things. I consolidated the debt I owed my friends into a spreadsheet. I went to work at my architectural firm, told my boss my grandmother died, and requested to take on the massive, high-stress city development project everyone else was avoiding. I needed the commission. I needed the distraction. As the priest said his final words, I heard the squelch of tires on wet grass. A black Mercedes pulled up. Peter got out. He looked terrible. He was wearing a wrinkled black suit, he hadn't shaved, and he had dark, bruised bags under his eyes. He carried a massive bouquet of white lilies. Behind him, the passenger door opened. Gina stepped out. She was wearing a black dress, but it was cut high on the thigh, and she was chewing gum. She held an umbrella over Peter, leaning into his arm. My co-workers bristled. One of them, Sarah, stepped forward, but I put a hand on her arm. Peter walked toward the grave, his eyes locked on me. He looked like a beaten dog begging for a scrap of mercy. Joey, he rasped over the sound of the rain. I'm so sorry. I wanted to pay for the plot. I tried to call the funeral home, but they said you'd locked down the arrangements. Leave, I said. Please, Joey. Let me just pay my respects. He stepped closer, offering the lilies. Before I could move, Gina sighed loudly. Look, Joey, we came all this way. Peter hasn't slept in 3 days because he feels guilty. Can you just drop the Ice Queen act for 5 minutes? It's sad your grandma died, but it was her time. Don't punish him for something he couldn't control. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the rain seemed to quiet down. Peter turned to Gina, his eyes widening in horror. Gina, shut up. What? She scoffed, rolling her eyes. I'm just saying. She was like, what, 80? You're acting like you murdered her. It's not your fault, she stroked out. Something snapped in Peter. For the first time in his life, the blinders he wore when it came to his girl bro fell away. He looked at her not as his chill, low-maintenance best friend, but as the callous, selfish parasite she actually was. I told you to wait in the car, Peter snarled, his voice trembling with rage. Get back in the fucking car. Gina blinked, stunned by his tone. Excuse me? I came here to support you. Get in the car, he roared. The sound was guttural, tearing from his throat. Gina stepped back, her bravado faltering. She glared at me, muttered something under her breath, and stomped back to the Mercedes. Peter turned back to me, chest heaving, the lilies shaking in his hand. Joey, please. I looked at him. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt disgust. You two deserve each other, I said quietly. I took a single white rose from Sarah, tossed it onto the casket, and turned my back on him. If you contact me again, I'm filing for a restraining order. My lawyer will be in touch about the money. I walked away, leaving him standing alone in the rain with his useless flowers. 2 weeks passed. The numbness faded, replaced by a cold, sharp energy. I threw myself into my work. The city development project was a beast, but I was relentless. I worked 14-hour days, sketching, modeling, and pitching. Every time I felt a crack in my armor, a memory of Grandma's smile, or the phantom weight of the engagement ring I never got to wear, I just drafted another blueprint. My lawyer, a sharp-tongued woman named Diane, moved fast. She filed a civil suit against Peter for the $200,000, citing the funds as my grandmother's designated pension, which I had power of attorney over. Peter didn't fight it. He tried to settle out of court, offering me $300,000, then $400,000. He kept sending messages through his lawyer, begging for a meeting. I rejected every single one. I only wanted what was mine, nothing more. But Peter's life was unraveling faster than I could have predicted. Word of what happened at the bachelor party had spread. His buddies, the same ones who called me drama for leaving, started to distance themselves. Nobody wanted to be associated with a guy who accidentally married his female best friend and let his fiancée's grandmother die. But the real fatal blow came from Gina. Because of the 30-day cooling-off period, Peter and Gina were legally married. And Gina, realizing Peter was pulling away from her, decided to assert her rights. I found out through the grapevine. A mutual friend told me that Peter had tried to freeze his assets to pay me back, only to discover that Gina had maxed out his company credit cards. She claimed she needed the money for emotional distress from the funeral incident. When Peter tried to cut her off, she hired a lawyer. Since there was no prenuptial agreement, because it was a truth or dare marriage, she was legally entitled to half of the assets acquired during their marriage, and she argued that his recent startup valuation fell under communal property, because he had restructured the company 2 days after they got the marriage certificate. The just paper excuse had become a steel trap. A month later, the 30-day waiting period was up. But they didn't divorce. They couldn't. Gina was dragging it out in family court, demanding alimony and a buyout of Peter's company shares. Peter's investors caught wind of the messy, borderline fraudulent marriage, and the impending asset split. They panicked. 2 major backers pulled their funding, citing a breach of the morality and stability clauses in their contracts. Peter's startup, the one I had worked 3 jobs to keep afloat 5 years ago, began to hemorrhage cash. I, on the other hand, was soaring. My presentation for the city development project was flawless. The board approved my design. My boss gave me a massive bonus, enough to pay off all my friends and put a down payment on a small, beautiful condo with a garden, just like the one Grandma always dreamed of. One evening, I was leaving the firm late. The autumn air was crisp. I pulled my coat tight, feeling a profound sense of peace. As I walked toward my car, a figure stepped out from the shadows of the parking garage. It was Peter. I almost didn't recognize him. He looked like the man I met 5 years ago, thin, ragged, swallowed by a cheap jacket. His designer clothes were gone. His hair was a mess. He didn't look like a CEO anymore. He looked entirely broken. "Joey," he said. His voice was a hollow rasp. I stopped, my hand hovering over my pepper spray in my pocket. "You're violating the terms of our legal agreement by being here, Peter." He raised his hands in surrender. I know. I had to see you. Just once." I didn't say anything. I just stared at him, waiting. He let out a broken laugh, looking down at his scuffed shoes. "You were right. About everything. About Gina. About me." He looked up, his eyes swimming with tears. "She took it all, Joey. The investors backed out. The company is filing for bankruptcy tomorrow. She drained the accounts before the judge could freeze them. I have nothing." He took a step forward, his voice cracking. "I lost my company. I lost my friends. But none of it hurts like losing you. I sit in that empty apartment every night, and I realize, you built me. You kept me alive when I was nothing. And the second I got everything, I threw you away for a girl who was just using me to stroke her own ego." He fell to his knees on the concrete, the same way he had when he proposed to me. But there was no ring this time. Just absolute ruin. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he sobbed, his head bowed. "I know I killed her. I know I killed us. I just need you to know, I hate myself. I will hate myself until the day I die." I looked down at him. 5 years ago, seeing him cry would have broken my heart. I would have dropped to my knees with him, held his face, and promised him we would fix it together. Now, I felt nothing. Not even pity. "Are you done?" I asked. He slowly looked up, his face stained with tears, startled by the utter lack of emotion in my voice. "You think coming here and crying makes you the tragic hero of this story?" I said, my voice calm, almost conversational. "You think losing your money balances the scales? It doesn't, Peter." I stepped closer, looking down into his pathetic eyes. "You didn't lose everything because of Gina. You lost everything because of you. You were so desperate to be the big shot, so desperate to play the cool, rich guy who bails out his chaotic friend, that you forgot who carried you when you were weak. You liked keeping Gina around because she worshipped your money and your status. I just loved you. And that wasn't exciting enough for you anymore." Peter let out a ragged sob, burying his face in his hands. "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry." "Keep your apologies," I said, stepping past him toward my car. "I don't want them. The only thing I want from you is the rest of my money. If your company goes under, Diane will put a lien on whatever you have left. Have a nice life, Peter." I unlocked my car, got in, and started the engine. As I drove out of the garage, I looked in the rearview mirror. He was still kneeling on the concrete, a solitary, broken figure fading into the darkness. 6 months later, spring had arrived, bringing with it a bloom of color that chased away the long, gray winter. I stood in the cemetery, the morning sun warming my back. I knelt and placed a fresh bouquet of hydrangeas, Grandma's favorite, on the polished granite headstone. "I bought the condo, Grandma," I said softly, tracing the engraved letters of her name. "It has a little patch of dirt in the back. I'm planting those ugly tomatoes you used to love so much. The ones that never grow right." I smiled, feeling a warm tear slide down my cheek. But it wasn't a tear of grief. It was a tear of peace. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Diane, my lawyer. The bankruptcy court finished liquidation. Peter Cooke's remaining personal assets were seized. Your $200,000 has been successfully recovered and wired to your account. Case closed. I read the text twice. A long, slow exhale left my lungs, carrying the very last ounce of weight I had been carrying for nearly a year. I had heard rumors about Peter and Gina. The divorce had finally gone through, but only after she had bled him completely dry. The assault charge from the street stall fight had eventually caught up with Gina, and without Peter's money to pay off the victims, she had been sentenced to a year in county jail. Peter was working as a bartender on the east side of the city. He lived in a rented room. He had tried to carve another wooden hair clip and mail it to my office a few weeks ago. I had thrown it in the trash without opening the envelope. I put my phone away and stood up, brushing the grass off my knees. I took a deep breath of the fresh spring air. The sky was a brilliant, endless blue. I looked at the headstone one last time. "I'm okay now, Grandma. I'm really okay." I turned and walked down the paved path toward the exit. My steps were light, my spine straight. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying anyone else's baggage. I belonged entirely to myself. And that was the greatest wealth of all.